So I'm quite excited about this session, actually, because I think it's something that we as the GSMA mHealth team have been working in quite a bit on our programs, and I'm also excited to invite representatives from all these organizations to actually talk a bit more about how they are turning data into information within their products and solutions to actually drive better healthcare. So we'll probably be talking a lot more specifically around how you're currently doing that, and then also look to some opportunities that exist within this whole data space, and then some challenges that we foresee in the future potentially as well. So I am going to actually start off with exactly the first thing. So just if you can briefly, so 3 of you have had a chance to actually present your solutions already, but if you can talk more to the point of what type of data you're generating and how you're either using that to drive better experiences around your product for your users, but then also how you're using that information to provide better care or more tailored care to each of those. Peter, you can probably expand a bit more about ARM and where you guys fit into the picture as well. So I'll just start with you, Matt.
Yeah, so I think I get kind of the joy of going straight after I've presented, so I'll try and not say the same things again. But I think for us as an organisation, what we're seeing with digital health is actually access to data that we'd never have access to. We can understand in real time which patients are responding to our therapies and which patients are not. That's great for us in terms of our relationship with payers and physicians and patients. But it's also brilliant for us from a whole range of opportunities. The opportunity commercially to be really, really clear and start to provide tools to help physicians decide which patients are going to be right for a therapy rather than trying that therapy out. But also identifying gaps in care. So where are the unserved populations with current therapy? What are the reasons that they're unserved, and using that to drive both our discovery efforts, so drug discovery efforts, but particularly clinical development efforts. You can no longer, it's a very competitive environment for patients into clinical trials. Being able to identify those patient populations and to invite them to trials based on their own personal data is also a very powerful opportunity.
So just in case you weren't before, here when I was on a stage explaining, B-WOM is a digital coach for women's health, and every woman goes through different tests in order to have their health goals, and the coach helps them to achieve those goals. So in terms of data, we collect a lot of data about the demographic of that women, how much do they care about themselves, and different issues. So the first thing we do with the data is like giving the women a picture of where they are, because since these intimate topics are very taboo and we don't share it with anyone, the first thing we do is just telling them, comparing with other women, how they are. And at least they realize that 60% of women have urine leaks, which is something they don't talk about, but at least they feel a little bit better. The second thing we do with data is giving them action plans. Like, now that we have the data, we give you solutions to put hands on your intimate health. And on the future, what we are going to do is trying to integrate more data from their daily habits, connecting different devices that women already have, like Fitbit or the Garmin watch or whatever, in order to understand much better what they do in their lives, in order to give them the solution, and not only more accurate, but that on the way that they are able to do something, because our daily lives are very full of things, so it's good for them to have this moment in their lives to dedicate for themselves.
Okay, so with the risk that not everybody knows ARM, ARM is a company that develops the designs that power 99% of your mobile phones, 90% of your wearable devices, in fact 70% of smart devices globally. So over the last 25 years, there's been 100 billion ARM-based chips in the market, obviously globally, and then over the next 10, 15 years, that's going to go up to 1 trillion. Mega numbers, mega global, and actually a lot of the sensors and devices we're speaking about in this conference are ARM-based. Let's move on from chip design because it gets a bit boring quite quickly. But let's think about a building has a foundation that is largely invisible as soon as it goes up. You create a different foundation for a greenhouse as you do a multi-story. And ARM is almost like that foundation layer. It supports whatever goes above it, but it has conduits in it, it has cables. You have to think about the building before you design it. So in the world where we have mobile connectivity and wearable devices that are powering our everyday lives, aren't they? You know, AI is integrated into those devices and it just forms part of our lives, whether we ask for Alexa for something or Siri for something or we just get directions to here. AI and data is integrated into those devices. So what we need to be aware of as a company and as an industry is where healthcare is moving. Where are the benefits in collecting more sensor data and using that into healthcare? And do we have the right concrete platform to support not only what's required today, but what's required in the future? As we get more towards having almost a digital twin in the cloud that completely represents our genomics, our lifestyle, our medication, our cells, and we can run scenarios on that healthcare digital twin. So do we have the technology in place? Do we have the challenges solved to enable us to collect all that data?
This chair is trying to eat me in. So I'm trying to make sure that I don't go down. From our perspective, as I reflected earlier, what we do is very simple. Some data comes from our patients and some data comes from devices in automatic way. And what we realized, although at the beginning we were very excited to do crazy stuff, you know, mixing a lot of things and coming up with some ideas that we thought is cool in our office, we realized the requirements of our hospital is very simple. Most of the things that we really add value is based on some simple if and or, i.e. if your 6-minute walk test drops 20% 3 times in a row, this is not good for PAH patients, and then maybe somebody has to look at it. That's the simple one. It's not AI, it's nothing like that. It's just an if, you know, this happens, then, you know, your traffic light goes red. And I haven't come across any situations yet across all of our deployments that clinicians, they need something super complicated. And that's what we have been focusing at the moment. While we are doing that, obviously we are collecting more and more data. Data that sometimes even we never thought about it to become very useful. Give an example. We have some projects in Parkinson's space, and you know, some stuff they do with our app doesn't matter, but one of the data we were collecting, because the device collects it anyway, is just walking gait. And a couple of months ago, there was this article published that based on looking at the walking gaits of a patient, you can start predicting whether the Parkinson is in on or off phase, which is a very, very hard things to detect. Even if you have MRI machines, all these things really hard. You cannot see it when a patient walks, but the data is there if you zoom in. And potentially, we or whoever that wants to work on it can do some really, really cool stuff in that space. That's our view at the moment. We do simple stuff, I told you, and in terms of data analytics, we do also very simple and basic stuff.
Actually, I really like that you've said to just, you know, you've kept it simple, because I think this idea is that there's all this data and we should be doing these magical things with it, but actually what's really needed and what's ultimately going to be used within health facilities and at the practitioner level and so forth is actually just the real basic insights around personal data or that healthcare data. So that was a great point from your side. And then also just identifying these gaps. And then also, I think what was quite interesting was providing patients with a better idea of themselves, actually, because I don't think they themselves ever look at all these data points in one holistic picture. So it's great to hear that we're able to do that for them as well and let them realize they're not on their own, as Marta mentioned. I think there is some talk about the future and where we may be heading. I'd be interested to know from each of you or any of you who feel particularly strong about this, but what are the dreams for where we're heading with data in the digital health space, and particularly with reference to your products, perhaps? And I'd like to actually label this the dream big data question. But yes, specifically for your products, what are your visions on how you're using data, how you plan to be using it, rather, and even in the digital health space, what do you foresee as the opportunity?
If I make a start, I would say that the dream is true precision medicine. So precision medicine today is almost kind of shorthand for genomics, and it's a big step forward. But we still have doses of medicine based on, you know, a study of 75 kilo males, rather than the actual way you as an individual are metabolizing that drug on actually the level of the particular condition you have on your behaviors. And the idea that we can kind of take what sort of happens for insulin now and make that something that's ubiquitous across all medicine, so that you've got the right set of therapies at the right doses delivered to a patient at absolutely the time they need it. And actually, to the point you made, that is an invisible thing to the person. It's done simply. But actually, you know, we kind of need to be like the duck going across the water and nobody sees what's happening below the surface, but actually delivering that kind of true precision medicine and taking that beyond the drugs as well, so that it's all the interventions that a patient needs to optimize the outcome for them.
Well, from my point of view, like if we go backwards like 30 years, and we go to a health conference, perhaps they were talking about the different challenges on healthcare, and they were talking about reducing cost, increase accuracy, and increase speed. I think that these challenges are still here, but because of the data, at least now we can promise that this is going to happen. And perhaps data is not helping in all the areas in the same way, but I think that we are like in the path. If I talk about B-WOM itself and how can, with the data, can help on healthcare in general, we have like different points where we can help. One of that is precision medicine, because since pharmas cannot give like the one-to-one pill, we can build like a personalized I cannot find the word. Yeah, like personalized treatment for the patient. But also we can give like the picture of what is the patient itself, because pharmas don't know to whom they are giving this treatment itself. We can also help hospitals on doing clinical research, not only on the patient recruitment, because we have the users and we have the data to do that screening of which ones are the ones that are going into the research itself, but we can also help on the data, all the data that they can gather for that research. And we can also help on the prediction of different issues that can come, because we are collecting the data of what's happening before that, so that we can predict a little bit of what's going to come later on.
I don't know if you want to give a perspective from where you see being able to benefit from data in the future regarding your business decisions.
Let's build upon a couple of comments here about invisible enablement that provides that data. because ultimately as people we don't want to be encumbered by technology causing challenges. So we need to understand what those challenges are to enable us to get that invisible connection with data. And just to really bring out 4 points, power. Not every solution needs to be recharged every night. Indeed, one needs to ask whether every solution indeed needs a battery. The level of power and low power technology we need to deliver the data that will give true insight is going to transform over the coming years. And that's a very exciting space to be in, and ultimately as things get lower power and cheaper, so we'll be able to collect more data that gives us more insight and invisibly supports more people like gait analysis on Parkinson's. But we can't go giving our data across freely. There has to be a security underpinning to it. Mobile technology, incredibly, we pay for everything with security, etc. like that. But in low power sensors, we need to be making sure that we've got the right technology there. Ultimately, it's insight. We need to make sure the data is packaged and delivered in a way that we can get massive insight into it, and also scale. As soon as we get to a point where, I was talking to a local hospital that has a challenge because they have 26,000 bits of equipment connected to the patient record. You do the sums and you think about the number of people with diabetes or asthma in that region. It's not going to be long before they have several million devices connected to their patient record supplying data. What's the security implications for that? And actually, even that's just a start. So scale, security, power, insight are all areas that need to be tackled. Yes, there's been massive gains in that, and we can see that on our mobile devices, but there's even more that the industry needs to do as a partnership together to understand the needs and to deliver the solutions, and that's an exciting position to be in.
So in talking about invisible connection, I think a part of this is probably related also to how these digital solutions are sort of seamlessly integrated with the user, right? So a very, very easy user experience. I don't know, Dan, if you have any insights about how you guys are using actual usage data of your products to get better engagement from your users, or how you're driving better experiences with your products for the users.
We are kind of lucky because the space we operate, high-cost chronic disease patients or rare diseases, patients by default, they are very in tune to use our technology. And then we always, majority of times, we have an engaged clinical team, nursing or clinicians looking at this data. And from the patient's perspective, you have these gods, which are doctors, looking at their data. So they try to behave and leverage and use the application as much as they need to do, because otherwise next time they go for a face-to-face basically meeting with the clinicians, there will be questions, okay, why haven't you done that? Why haven't you taken your drugs? Or where are your temperatures, blood pressures, et cetera, et cetera. So, and I guess that's just pure luck, because the area we operate, it requires that kind of engagement and brings that. If you do like a general diabetes, I do agree with the approach in the previous talk that it's really hard to get a meaningful use. So then for us, having that engagement, it ultimately enables us to get clinicians to do more things, because patients are more engaged and clinicians becomes more engaged, and then suddenly you add real value. Because most of the solutions you deploy it and then nobody using it and it dies. And that's why we didn't go toward that side of a spectrum at this stage at least. I believe at some point, and this is kind of part of our dream, that we have built some modules, simple stuff, but there are amazing stuff that like AZ, Johnson & Johnson's and others, 2 people in Garage, they have built, and we can integrate those as a part of our offering, something that is complete. And then we've been talking to Peter for now a year. We are not expert in connecting to devices in the most secure way, but they are, and they're doing all the chips and all the connectivities. We can piggyback on their infrastructures, on the connectivity and security. And then 1 year from now, today actually I got an email from our friends in Cupertino. They sent me an email, it's a press release, it's public, it's not confidential, that I think Apple Watch got approval as FDA for cardio monitoring the heart rate. And it's great because 3 years ago, this was gadget. Today, the heart rate got FDA approval. I'm assuming, I haven't read the news, so don't quote me on that. But 1 year from now, maybe there is a glucose monitoring of some sort, connected, seamless, without efforts. And that's what we need to bank on. We cannot build and dream only based on the technologies that's available today. We are dreaming based on the great work AZ is doing, and it will come in 1 year from now. ARM people are doing, and it will become reality in maybe 1 year, 2 years, and then lots of other partners. And if we do that, then this means that we will do something unique in the age. Yes, we can wait and 5 years, 10 years until everything is there, but probably by then, lots of us, we are not around the way that we are operating and the contributions we have in healthcare. So that's kind of, I guess, our intake from what we do.
Great. So, Matt, Dan actually mentioned something now that very briefly, but I guess with your current frustration around the multitudes of products that are out there, we don't necessarily just want these vanity metrics where we reach millions of people, but then actually, as Dan mentioned, many of them end up not using the actual solutions over time. You have previously mentioned how you guys are actually using data to try and prevent that. I don't know if you want to expand a bit on that.
Well, so there's kind of there's what we're doing today and where I think that will go, which are two slightly different things. So I think the what we're doing today is that real-time monitoring of where different people with different characteristics are dropping off of using something, and then making a judgment actually as to whether that's appropriate. Because it may be that if there's been if a behaviour change has become embedded, and that was what you were trying to do, you shouldn't be sad that somebody stopped using the product. Or whether it's because actually you've got a design flaw and you're no longer meeting their needs, and then you do need to do something about it. I think what we're starting to see and starting to be able to do, and I think will be the explosion, is passive data collection, and being able to use changes in the data that we're collecting passively to then wake something back up. So, for us, if we look at the challenge of wanting to do two things with a solution, one is to optimize the kind of adherence to self-management, be that medication adherence or anything else that you're looking for from self-management, but you're also looking to detect and interact and to support a patient in acute events. Those are two different things that you need to be able to do within the same platform. The danger is that you make the behaviour change and then the person is no longer interacting when they really need it, because there's a change in their acute condition. So it's having that program that can wake back up again because of the passive data that you might get from the medication, from accelerometers in devices that they're using, from the way they're interacting with social media, from just where they're going around the place. I mean, there's a fantastic paper, I think, from Manchester University looking at the GPS signal on a patient's phone for patients with bipolar disorder, and able to use that to detect the point of an onset of a bipolar event. Now that is fantastic because it requires nothing of the individual, but it's there to help to say, we've now detected this change, here's the help you need. And better still, it doesn't need to go to you as an individual there, it can go to a family member who's going to help care for you. And so it's that kind of passive, the ability to collect passive data and process it to wake a service back up, rather than us having the expectation that it has to be used every day to be successful.
Yeah, I've seen similar solutions around management with drug users and how, when their GPS coordinates indicate that they're going to an area where, they would typically use drugs, it actually sends a message to them, how are you doing, where are you, and that is exactly that. It's completely passive, but at the point when it's needed most, that interaction is there. And I think when you're looking at truly delivering support to these people, that's how it's going to make the most difference.
Absolutely.
I think when we're talking about scaling these solutions and the wealth of data and also the sensitive nature of the data, are there any particular strong thoughts around this data privacy issue, and especially when we're looking at sort of multiple solutions coming together in a broader ecosystem? What are some of the challenges you foresee and issues around that? I don't know if there's anyone in particular who would like to.
Well, yeah. In other case, we collect very sensitive data, so we have to be aware of in terms of servers and all the hardware we need and the technology we need to preserve that data to be shared in other spaces. And at the end, we are not the owners of the data. It's the person itself that is the owner of the data, and we have to be aware of that. We only use the data in order to give them the solution, but it's not ours. So we have to be very aware of that. For me, it's very important. Yeah.
So data security, in many respects, isn't limited to a healthcare problem.
Sure.
You know, we have self-driving cars that ultimately need to be very secure in many respects, and the industry as a whole is building the security in our ARMA's large department all around that already. But when we look at the healthcare particularities there, it's okay having security from your device to your cloud, great. Is that secure? Not really, if you can take that device and put it on someone else and collect different data. So you need to figure out who you're connected to. Also, data in health doesn't necessarily just go to one point. There's a whole consent model in here. As an individual, I might want my data to be sent off to some genomics research person, as well as my hospital, as well as my caregivers, as well as my local pharmacy. So there are peculiarities in the way data is distributed in healthcare. And also there's the metadata associated with what my device is, what level of regulation it is. So there are peculiarities in health, per se, with security that we need to address and are being addressed. But we can also leverage the significant benefits that we're getting from other vertical industries in security. And again, that's the advantage of talking together at events like this, where actually the pharmaceutical, the medical device companies, the medical service companies, that we all actually gather insights from each other to make sure that these go into the foundation products.
So, Dan, earlier you mentioned in your presentation that you have multiple modules that are sort of plugging in to support each other. Do you have examples of how data from different modules can be used to actually enhance solutions in other spaces, and how you might have used that?
You mean by other space, like outside of hospitals, or
even other healthcare areas? So you maybe serve different patients
Sure.
different. How have you guys actually you seen benefits?
Yeah, the reality is like diseases are more alike than unalike, generally speaking. This is kind of how we found out about it. We were initially focused on rare diseases, and it turned out that rare diseases are the most complicated one. And when you build things for rare diseases that are complicated, and if you do it a couple of times, then you end up building lots of things to support those diseases, which are transferable to other diseases. The kind of modules we have are very simple. It's not even symptom reporting. Every disease comes with some sort of symptom reporting. It's just a matter of if you have cancer, it's diarrhea, vomiting, X, Y, Z. If you have Parkinson's, there are other stuff. Medications, every patient needs to take medications or do a specific exercises or activities as part of their care plan. So our medication tracker does that. And then you have all type of prompts which are validated. Sometimes we can license it from third-party companies or research institutions. Again, you just need to build the foundation so that you can build new stuff very, very efficiently, and that's kind of what we did. Then there are some scenarios that we have gone a little bit more specific and leveraged what is out there around 6-minute walk test. It is not rocket science. You walk 6 minutes, it measures how far you walk, what's your heart rate at peak, heart rate at rest. At the moment, for this simple task, you have to go to the hospitals. Some of the hospitals, they allocate one of their long corridors for patients to go back and forth, and there is a nurse usually sitting there monitoring what's happening. You can do that at home. By doing something simple, now you stop patients traveling unnecessarily. Or then you have example of connectivity to blood pressure. So when you do something for blood pressure collections, that is relevant for heart patients, renal transplant patients, etc., etc. And suddenly when you build a few modules or several modules, then you can start playing with it. And here and there, we need to add something, right, that we don't have if you face it. But we got to a maturity that on the base level, we don't need. But there are amazing innovations with like a fantastic scientific backing and validations. I know AZ is doing amazing stuff in this space. Johnson & Johnson, Janssen, they are doing like really, really amazing stuff. They invested tons of money to build a specific module that does something very specific to a disease like Alzheimer or autism. We don't have that resources, and we are not even expert, even if we had the resources to do that. But what if we can just take it and make it available across all the basic and simple modules we have to our clients? That's what we like to do. Same goes for devices. We are not into business of building, making devices, because if we can do software just fine, that's great, we are happy. Making hardware is beyond us. Security, it's an ongoing concern for us. Like literally these days in every meeting we have internally, let alone external, we talk about it. But we are not, at the end of the day, the best experts. These guys, they have like departments around it. Apple folks, they have like a massive team around it. And we try to learn from other people. And that's kind of like summarizes what we want to do. And we cannot do what we do and continue this without the support of other partners in a real way, not just talking. You know, talking about it is easy, but we don't want to talk about it. Like, we want to do it, we want to integrate it, we want to make it available, and ultimately make it for our patients, you know, the best choice of modules. It doesn't need to be Metapad. If you saw my presentation, I barely use even Metapad logo because it's not about Metapad. It's not about us. It's about the whole ecosystem. And that can only happen if we work together. And this is a message. I keep driving it and keep pushing it. And we got to stay positive around it. It's really hard. AZ knows, Peter knows how hard it is in a healthcare space because it's just challenging and there are lots of regulations. But we got to stay positive, we got to support each other, and we got to believe in each other. And when I said, you know, Sean Mathican believed in us, I meant it. If he wasn't there, we wouldn't be where we are today. If Apple didn't believe in us, when Apple partnered with us, we were like nobody, literally. Still, we are nothing. But back then, we had only a few hospitals. And these little things changed us. And we need to do more of this for more companies because Metapad is one player out of many.
Great. So I think I'm going to open up to the audience now if there are any questions for any specific panelists or for all of them in general. I don't know. I can't really see from up here. Sorry. I know there's one there.
There's one down there.
Do you have a mic circulating?
There, on the other desk. Oh.
Hey, I just have a question, or it's kind of a two-pronged question. A lot of the times we keep talking about data and all of this stuff that's kind of, oh, it belongs to the patient. Yeah, if I'm weighed in an NHS hospital by an NHS practitioner and they write the notes in an NHS logbook, how can I possibly own that data? And then the second is with kind of data security. Excuse me. If I'm a patient, let's say a type 1 diabetic, am I really concerned with the security of my data, or am I concerned with the ongoing treatment of my condition and how my care is improving? And are these talks and concerns a bit disconnected from the actual problems that patients face on a daily basis?
So just sorry, for clarity around the first one, the ownership issue, if you can just...
Yeah, so if I'm not the person that's personally generating this data, how can I have ownership of it? If it's my Apple Watch that's tracking my gait, my distance that I've walked, how can I ever truly own that data if it's not something I'm producing myself? And if it's held on servers of another company that I don't have access to, like I can own this book because I've got it here, but if it's stored in San Francisco, how am I owning that? So how can this whole data exchange happen? And then, yeah, secondly, what if I'm a patient, am I concerned around data ownership, and is that a bit disconnected from the day-to-day concerns and worries of patient care? And is it more what these big companies, because they are in the business of selling data, care about more than an actual patient does?
Okay, I'm going to allow for 2 more questions and then we'll
one over
answer
here.
them all together. There was one there. Yeah.
Thank you,
Hi, I'm actually probably one of the few actual patients that are here today. My question goes to Dan. Dan, I've had Parkinson's now for 42 years, and I've been waiting for an app that could track my on-off. I mean, I know when I'm on and when I'm off. I'm intrigued to know how this app works. Now, whether this is appropriate for this, whether I should maybe to ask you this outside of the panel, but I'm really intrigued as to how you're doing this and where the data would go and how it would, because I'm a big believer in having wearables because my condition is so fluid that going to the doctor, say, once every 6 months does not give him a picture of how I am. Yeah. But a wearable would, so I'm intrigued to know how it would work.
Right, sorry, I can't see if there are any other questions. One at the back there.
Hi there again. It's a question, I guess, immediately at Dan, but I think it'd be good for the rest to understand from the rest of the panel as well. I think, Dan, you hinted at earlier in terms of Metapad toward the open nature of the platform in the future, potentially, about other parties being able to develop componentry and things for it. And I was just really wanted to understand, what is the opportunity there? Is there the potential that it can be opened up as a platform for which people can use some of the kind of core aspects and componentry and things for it, but then be able to develop their own componentry for their own potential condition or kind of organizational needs and so on and so forth? And I'd be then interested to hear, I guess, from the rest of the panel around kind of whilst obviously I appreciate the kind of commercial aspects from the pharma businesses and so on and so forth, in terms of how do we make sure that there is a real kind of shared opportunity here so that we don't get 300,000 apps in the App Store trying to do the same thing and so on.
Great, thank you. So I think we'll start with the question around ownership of data. So if the data doesn't exist with the patient, how can they truly own it? And I don't know if there's anyone particular who'd like to address that first.
Well, no. I would like to say that indeed the data is owned by you. The other point is that us, as a company, we give you the place to store it, all that data. But it depends on the ethic of the company too, because just an hour or so ago, I was talking with a woman in this room, and she told me that she had downloaded an app and then suddenly received a lot of spam from other health apps. So there are like 2 sides of the coin here. The one side is there are regulations about this, and you have to be committed to that. And then there's the ethic of the company itself, that there are companies that they don't really do it.
I mean, I think data privacy law is fairly clear and fairly simple. And so, particularly for an individual, your right to be forgotten and have your data wiped is very clear and very obvious. The question of whether a diabetes patient cares about who has their data isn't probably a factor. They absolutely care about how that data is used. If you're a type 2 diabetic who isn't taking your medication, who isn't dieting, who isn't exercising, and then you see your insurance premium double on that basis, you will absolutely care about how that data is used. And sort of inappropriate use of data, however it may exist, and to your point as well around advertising, is going to be one of the things that will destroy trust in this area. And actually, this is a trust-based thing. We're asking for patients to trust us with their data and for us to use it appropriately. by any survey, big pharma companies and big technology companies are right at the bottom of the list when it comes to trust with data. So we've kind of got a bit of an uphill battle and need to move very carefully, which I'll finish by saying actually is another reason why the ecosystem and relationships within that ecosystem are so critical. It's about being very open about how the data will be used and who will benefit from it. And that if it's, that there will certainly be things that we would want to maintain some commercial benefit from. In terms of the insights we get, I can never believe that we get to a point where we start then selling that data to other people, but we may well partner with other people who are going to research that data and provide insights to society.
I think this is a growing concern amongst users of these types of solutions, because I think people become more and more aware that actually, they are giving up a lot of information about themselves to someone they don't know. So when you're mentioning, creating that understanding up front, how are you guys currently doing that in your solutions? Like, how do you ensure that when users are signing up, that they're fully aware of what's being done with their data, and how you intend to use it, how they can access it if they want it, or how do you create that sort of trust with your users?
In our case, we don't have the access yet because we need a little bit more of technology to do that. But in terms of deleting the data, it's very visible. If they want to delete the data anytime, they can do it, and it's very easy.
Okay, so do your users understand that the data sits on their device, or where it sits? Do they know typically?
The data is on the device. They can see the results of every single test, and we show them, but we also give them the opportunity to delete everything, which is important for them. So I don't want you to have my data anymore.
I think the challenge is that we face is kind of almost a design challenge from a user experience perspective, because download something new or open the next version of iOS and read the end user license agreement, and nobody does. You kind of want to get through it and click the end button. And it's full of legalese that nobody can understand anyway. So I think it's kind of how you can take pages and pages of text and turn it into 3 or 4 bullet points about what we're going to do with your data and what we're not going to do with your data, and just be really, really clear up front. Hope that people read that, but also provide that information to the healthcare professionals who are kind of involved in the process as well, so that they can really clearly answer those questions.
We have to be clear, but the truth is that people are so used to share data nowadays. We are every single second sharing data about us. When we tweet, when we put a like on Facebook, they are constructing a persona about us. So we are very used to that. And perhaps I think it's important for the users to understand where the data goes, because this is something that I don't think people is not so aware of it.
Yeah, and I think specifically with healthcare devices, especially when you're collecting very sensitive information about users in order to offer a more tailored solution, I think that's where, if someone's not read the disclaimer or the notifications in the beginning, they kind of get to that question and they're like, actually, not feeling very comfortable, I don't know where this is going. So I do think it's important to reinforce it at that stage. Dan, you had a question around how through these potentially wearables and your solutions, you're able to use data to, say, tend to something like Parkinson's and help monitor a Parkinson's condition.
I was trying really hard to remember both questions. I have like fish memory. Thanks for repeating it. So the idea you mentioned, I love it actually, and this is something I try really hard not to use words of machine learning and AI in any of my presentations, and I managed, I think, not to use it this time, which is great, because there's a lot of misconception on the applications. But one of the areas that I'm personally very excited, and as a company we are looking into it, is what you mentioned as a patient. You go to a doctor and you say, "Doc, I don't feel good." The doctor look at your vital signs. Everything looks great. You know, your heart is like 20 years old, you know, like persons, and the blood pressure is great, but you don't feel right. And as a patient, often you know it a lot earlier than any doctor could tell. But doctors don't have visibility because they don't have all the data, or if they have all the data, there is no way to connect the dots yet. There are too many things happening. And this is an area that we think anybody cracking it is becoming potentially one of the largest companies in the world, not just in the healthcare space. And it correlates and resonates to what you mentioned as a potential, you know, as a patient that you're suffering from a specific condition. To be very specific on Parkinson is very new for us. We did some little pilots in China with a couple of hospitals, part of our partnership with China Resources earlier this year. What we do there is very simple. You have the normal stuff that we have for most of our diseases, and then you have two things. One is the reaction time. It's a test that we developed it in collaboration with a partner, which you can see as a patient whether your reaction time is getting better or worse. If you're taking medications, you see whether it has real effect or not in a quantitative way, not in a qualitative way. You at the moment, just as an example for Parkinson, you go in front of doctors, do this, and then they watch it and they look at it whether you got better or worse. And then this, the whole walking gait stuff is very new. We weren't even actively looking into it, but we were collecting it as part of one of our modules. And then the article came out a couple of months ago, and we thought, oh, that's cool. We haven't done anything. We don't want to even claim that 100% you can predict, but potentially, if anybody can predict, based on this data, it's something that we should be able to do, or anybody that's collecting similar data. It's not only us. But I would love for you to, use one of our app. I can give you access, play with it, tell us what you think. We spend a lot of time with patients and to learn from them, because at the end of the day, you build things for them. But the idea of patients can feel it, it's a good idea to somebody to crack it. And I'm very excited about it. And I think it will be the true use case of AI and machine learning. If somebody says, okay, this patient is not good, doing well. Haven't seen anybody doing it yet, but good idea for anybody pursuing.
Great. So you had another question from a gentleman at the back regarding the open nature of the solution. Yeah. And unfortunately, I can't remember the second half of that, so perhaps you
that's
could.
why I was quiet on the first, for the first question, like repeating myself, okay, not to forget. The platform play, it's very new for us. I don't want to sit here and claim, oh, we have created, and then you just come in and then all plugged in and everyone happy. This was something we thought is going to happen in 2020, as I mentioned, but we are getting inbound interest from small companies and biggest pharmaceuticals in the world that they have created something specific and they think that modules lives better across some of the other functionalities we have, and we can open doors to the hospitals for them. Because frankly speaking, two scientists, entrepreneurs in university, they might not be the best people to commercialize or push these initiatives into the hospitals, the security considerations, regulations, et cetera, and we might be able to take part of those pain points out of their way. The platform idea is it's open, so you should just connect with us directly and we'll look into what we can do. And then one of the things we really like, just let's do a small project before we get too excited about working together. Let's find a client that we think might like your solutions. Let's deploy a quick, whatever you want to call it, prototype, pilot, whatever. See if it works, and if it works, then we look into making it even more seamlessly integrated. But the idea is not even for companies, even for students and university. We partnered with Johns Hopkins exactly for that. They have massive organizations, building new stuff, testing, validating in hospitals, getting the outcomes. And then when there is something, they can come to us, and the idea is we will add them to the MetaPath platform. Similar partnership we have done with Peking University in China now. And we are very open to the idea, but for us, it's more like before we learn even to walk ourselves, we are trying to run, and we are trying to keep 2 other people also running with us. Don't expect perfections. It's just really, really early days for us. But we thought, hey, people are knocking our doors. We should do something about it. And it's going to be, people need to be patient. But I think we should be able to make it work in one way or the other. So reach to me, myself, or my team. We'll make it happen.
Can I add just one thing to that, which is I think from a big company perspective, there is absolutely no view that any one company is going to build everything and have best of breed across everything. I think anybody who thinks that is rather dumb. And so what we're going to be doing is kind of rather, as you're saying, you're looking for people who've got that real best of breed thing that does one thing particularly well. Or maybe something that's got a great piece of evidence with it that you want to be able to then use and get out to as many users as possible to maximize the benefit. I think one of the challenges that I see for small companies is there's often a need to invest in that brilliant piece of innovation, but also a need to invest in the underlying technology, because that's the only way that you're going to get investors interested in it, that you're going to have something to show people. And I can tell you quite honestly that I'm not interested in that piece, because that's of zero value to me. I'm interested in the piece of innovation. And so the more that smaller companies can do what you're suggesting, the better it's going to be for everybody, because you're investing in your innovation, you're investing in the breakthrough step that's going to drive an improvement in a healthcare outcome, rather than investing in an underlying technology platform that, frankly, the majority of big companies are going to throw away when they go into partnership with you. And so actually, come with the idea, come with the clinical data that supports the idea, and say, hey, can we partner on this, and can we put it on your platform instead of building our own? It's a good way of really accelerating all of this. And I think the majority of companies are going to be happy for you to do that, and still that you as a startup retain and own that IP, that if it doesn't work out, as you say, in those kind of first steps, you can go somewhere else with it. But there must be a huge amount of money being wasted creating platforms that are only ever going to be used essentially for a proof of concept.
100% agree, and that's why we went to in the stream of innovation, we went directly to universities that usually these ideas and innovations are created, and also they have a space to get validated in those environments easier than when you're a commercial company. In line with what exactly you mentioned. And it's cheaper for you guys, it's easier for us and everyone. So I highly back that view.
Great. Yeah, I think that's a great point. I mean, yesterday I spoke to the need to collaborate, and we've also mentioned that even when it comes to things like data security, there are other players who understand that better than you do. So there are massive benefits for collaboration rather than isolating yourself and trying to do it all. Thank you for your contributions. I think it's been a great conversation, and thank you for the questions from the audience. I just have 3 sort of key takeaways in closing. And I think we've had some great examples of how this data can deliver true precision of both, medication, treatment actually, and care. So we know that we're really starting to see how that is, and we have great ideas of how that's going to improve in the future. We've spoken a bit about how the invisible connection is absolutely essential. So the less the user realizes you're collecting this data from them and using it to their benefit, the better. And then I think the thing is that we have these big dreams about what can be done with this data, but really it's essential to keep it simple. Start with small steps and make sure that whichever ways in which you're using data and turning it into information, make sure that that information is actually going to be useful to the various players in the ecosystem. So yeah, thank you very much for your contributions today.
Thank you.
Thank you.